What are in the dark cells beneath the imperial palace on Terra, where things even the Emperor could not destroy are imprisoned? One of his missing creations, a weapon to enslave worlds, the Eater of Gods, and when the Great Rift opened, what escaped into the galaxy? Welcome friends to another 40k video, and shall we begin? So in brief, what are the dark cells and who guards them? There are terrible things locked away beneath the Emperor's palace, eldritch terrors from the depths of old night that could annihilate the Imperium. To the Shadow Keepers, the Custodies, falls the duty of standing guard over them until the end of time. But what dangerous beings live inside, and what stopped their escape from auric gods? Even the echo of the Custodies' steps felt wrong. But listen, oh yes, they would all listen. Silence prevailed at first, but only at first. Then the half-heard voices would drift through the iron-grey corridors in languages older than mankind itself. Try to attend to fathom the nature of the imparted message, and the silence would fall again like a dolorous veil, deafening, absolute, until the voices returned at the barest edge of hearing. Lesser men would have been driven to madness. The voices belonged to the eldritch creatures, to the horrors and grotesques, to the macabre and the profane. Not all had flesh, not all were truly alive, but every wretched thing incarcerated behind the wards and santic circles, the rune-locked gates, the binding chains, the null cages and obviation charms, possessed anima. Vero Gallant, the warden, would feel it trying to worm in, to unpick the mental fastness he had raised around his mind. Every cell and oubliette held an abomination, a thing so terrible that it could not be killed or destroyed, either because no known method of annihilation had been found, or because it was unknown if the very act of dissolution would unleash a greater calamity. Remnants of old night, when the galaxy was swallowed by darkness, and humanity stood alone, ignorant and afraid. These things went beyond evil, and only the dark cells could keep them away. He came to an empty cell. The gloom inside beckoned, but he refused it. Even in absence, the thing that had once been held here still had a presence, like an unquiet spirit. It seemed to haunt the room, which was scarcely 10 feet across, and the same deep. A void held him back, a space both unoccupied and occupied at the same time. Poised at the threshold, Vero Gallant lowered vigilance and pointed the guardian's spear's scythe-like blade towards the dingy cell, as if he could impale the memory of what it had contained. He closed his eyes, and was assailed by visions. A great leviathan slowly uncoiling from a heady broom, its malice suffocating. A skeletal effigy, its horns reaching into the night, and the screams of sacrifices, heavy on blood-misted air. A cage of lightning, a cruciform figure silhouetted within the forks, tearing slits in reality. When he opened his eyes, he had fallen to one knee. His heart pounded, breath soared through his mouth. The open door behind him served as a reminder of their collective failing. It was not the only one. When the great rift had opened, its energies had reached the cells, and the Custodies had found the wards had escaped. Creatures from beyond Materium, relics from old night, dangers let out upon the galaxy, relics that they now had to go out and find. Later, the Custodies has tracked down one of the relics, but what damage has it done to an entire planet? Meroved followed his eye to the stricken masses, hunched and prostrate on the ground. Labourers, scribes, functionaries, overseers, lawkeepers or merchants. It did not matter who they were or what they did. A great leveller had made a mockery of station and influence. They each suffered the same, and as one, paralysed, emaciated, choking on their own drool. Both living and dead had fallen where they had stood, some atop one another, others seized by palsy, with fingers half clenched into claws and limbs trembling. A low hum emanated from the mass, and as Adio's eyes narrowed, Meroved knew the custodian had realised why. They are aware and in agony, pain beyond reason, all motor function interrupted, nerve endings stripped raw and exposed, synapses in spasm. Psyche had it worst, and were the first to feel its effects. "It is the cage," they were Valor Gallant's first words since he had boarded the gun cutter. He remained sat in his seat, uninterested in the crisis below. "It is a psychic amplifier, a relic of old night. Despots and tyrants used it to subdue populations and bend them to their will, to keep the people quiescent, to work until death, to fight their wars without question. But in their hundreds, possibly even thousands, and certainly not an entire world. This is beyond that, beyond what I know of the cage, and I know everything that has been uncovered. It was basically being used by an inquisitor to recreate the shock of Malcador the hero's death, and somehow, in that plot, reawaken the Emperor. The custodians retrieve the cage and take it back to the dark cells. Now let's say you are a warlord. During the Wars of Unity on Terra, with this device, you could instantly conquer a place without using your army, allowing it to be deployed elsewhere. You could tell the populace of a strongly held fortification to lay down their arms and leave, and so on. It has a lot of potential. Now think the havoc it could cause if given free rein on Terra in the correct hands. Now, what are more of these horrors, and how are they held in place within the cells? Hecaron walks past the outer doors to cells and oubliettes. Some only he can see, others bulge with locks and buzz with field envelopes. Behind these doors are things that the custodians cannot or will not destroy. There is an old man whose words can kill billions. There is a coiling darkness that has no shape until it is seen. There is a small black cube without hinge or lid, and on, locked and sealed from memory and sight. They are things from the depths of time and darkest reaches of the human soul. Some have names in the language of old myths, the Unmaker of Thrones. Some have never been named and shall never be. There are living things and machines and objects that sit and don't move, but all are awake. Hecaron reaches a turn in the stone passage and pauses. He's counting, silently, each fraction of a second sliced off from the future with total precision. The dark cells are not a set of chambers, you see. They are a maze, forever remaking itself, filled with cutouts and kill systems. Sometimes the Shadow Wardens let one of the lesser prisoners out to assess the systems. The result is never freedom. Hecaron and his kind hold the totality of the maze in their minds. They move through it by synchronizing with every twist, turn and alteration. If you could doubt that they were no longer human, this feat should put the matter beyond doubt. Hecaron reaches his count and steps forward. The passage behind reconfigures. Where there was air, there is now blank stone. His next step is up onto the wall as embedded grav generators change which way is up. The passage ahead spins, traps and hidden weapons cluster, fire at random and rearm. Hecaron keeps walking, untouched and unimpeded, meshed into the lethal mechanisms. All those security mentions seem to relate to the warp in some way, either nullifying it or controlling the warp energy, so a lot of those inside must be linked with that. It also mentions black stone, so my mind goes straight to a substance known as noctilith, or black stone, a Necron type of stone that can enhance or dampen the powers of the warp, so likely used for dampening here. I'm sure I recall mention of it being used somewhere within the workings of the Astronomicon, and I would theorise within the mechanisms of the Golden Throne. We also have a list of things named within the cells that are just names. I'll give you them all and give you my thoughts when I think there is some speculation worth saying. Within one cell is an old man whose words can kill billions. This immediately reminds me of a thing called enuncia, a language that can be uttered by a human and smack down a Primarch, dubbed the language of creation. You know a lot of it and most don't. You can do a lot of damage in that situation. The Emperor at one time sought to use it, and so maybe he knew the danger of this fella and locked him away. The next example is one called the Slytherin Dreamer. They are mentioned within one of the old Custodes codexes. It's there, we are told. Custodian Gao had guarded the dark cells for 17 years, during which time he had been called upon to leave Terra thrice on heavily veiled reclamation missions. It was Gao's blade that slew the Slytherin Dream on Tarna 6, a grim achievement that is reflected in the new names inscribed within his black armour. Another thing within the dark cells is advanced repairing technology. The example we have is taken out of the dark cells and given to the imperial fists by the custodies to fix their ship, the Phalanx. It's a Dark Age of technology ship and has been damaged after the heresy. An example of how this technology might work sits within the Psi Titans of the Ordo Sinister, who are creations of the Emperor. They can repair themselves by turning back time. Perhaps this technology could also do that to help fix the Phalanx. We have 3 prisoners from the text earlier. A coiling darkness that has no shape until it is seen. There is a small black cube without hinge or lid, and on, locked and sealed from memory and sight. Could that mean it could infiltrate your mind through the eyes, or enter your memory, maybe if those things were there, which is why it is locked away in that way. And there are things from the depths of time and darkest reaches of the human soul. Some have names in the language of old myths: the Eater of Gods, the Serpent of Ending, the Unmaker of Thrones. Some have never been named, and never shall be. We also have the much debated Subject 11. Now the obvious one for this, that everyone says, is that they are the 11th Primarch, one of the forgotten purged Primarchs, and that's a valid guess. But I'd say no, honestly based on one of the excerpts we have been through. It says, either because no known method of annihilation has been found, or because it was unknown if the very act of dissolution would unleash a greater calamity. The Emperor could kill the Primarchs. This goes against that. But what about Vulcan, you might think? When Magnus fights Vulcan in the Webway during the heresy, he nearly undoes Vulcan's regenerating ability. Magnus says to himself something like that if he had more time, he could have done it. Now this is Magnus, who is arrogant and has an ego, but he does know this area of warp sorcery, so I believe this would have been an actual possibility. The rest are just names to me. Maybe for some, like It That Craves, they could be warp entities, created when a certain action was taken, like Draconian and the First Murder. And let me know what you think they could be. I'll be going through the rest of the list now. The Sorrow of Caracalla, the Chalice of Darkablaster, Soul Delver, Eight of the Skull, Sevenfold Trimiasma, Granter of 6 Wishes. That sounds like a servant of Zeech to me. It That Craves, One of the Fell, the Triblight Amulet, and the Lament of Unreason. So we've been over all these objects that are held within the cells, and we've seen some examples of things that have escaped. But who has managed to escape from the cells outside of the few we have covered? When the Great Rift opened and that flood of warp energy moved across the galaxy, that helped some creatures escape the dark cells. But there is one other individual we have to mention, the mysterious Cypher. We don't know who he is or who he serves outside of himself, but he was in the dark cells and escaped. We see this within the Cypher Lord of the Fallen novel. It's all told from his perspective, so take this with a grain of salt, but this is how he told us, the reader, that he did it. 300 years before his incarceration, a man lived in a labour hive on Mars. He was one stage in the thousands of stages that created a device that switches electrocharges between a single input and 2 outputs. As he got older, he pushed himself harder to avoid being sent to flesh reclamation. But his heart gave out. But the component was still passed on down the line, as it seemed to be complete. Then Cypher's narration takes us to the present, where he's held in the dark cells on Terra. Dark angels trying to get hold of him, to hide their secret shame with the fallen, are there, and take out the communication and power conduits of the cells. Power should be diverted from elsewhere, but instead power to the upper levels of the dark cells gives out. Machine spirits send more, power spikes, and this hits the switch made over 300 years before. The flaw left by the moment of his death finally bears fruit. The energy bursts out, backups fail, and just like that, the upper third of the dark cells have no power. This disaster, combined with a warp storm, unlike any senior millennia, is battering Terra that now could flood the cells. The wards shatter, Ghost-like screams are heard throughout the complex. The maze of gravity generators and corridors grinds like a key, trying to turn in a jammed lock. Cypher opens his eyes and stands up, his cell door open. But why keep all this dangerous technology and eldritch horror? Why hold dangers near to the palace, the heart of your empire? My thoughts initially were to keep an eye on them, but why not destroy these things? Was the Emperor saving them for later? We do see technology from the Dark Cells used to fix the phalanx as we discussed earlier, so clearly there is a lot of dangerous psyche enhancement sort of technology, and we see him use technology like that with the throne and within the Sight Titans through the Sirkrux anima, so the Emperor will do it if necessary. But then the real full answer grabbed me with this quote from earlier. Every cell and oubliette held in abomination, a thing so terrible that it could not be killed or destroyed, either because no known method of annihilation had been found, or because it was unknown if the very act of dissolution would unleash a greater calamity. So the Emperor built this place, the Emperor put these things here, or at least the custodians did, under his guidance. Perhaps he saw down some future paths where destroying these things would lead to greater calamity. So instead, he stored them under his palace where he could keep an eye on them to stop that calamity, he hopes, from coming along. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.